This is what it looks like when you live in an authoritarian country. This is what it looks like when you live in a fascist state. Granted, you know, they're not hauling people off in railroad cars yet, but when the government targets you for intimidation because of the content of your speech, then you know your country has passed a major turning point. This is so wrong. You ever heard of Hasan Piker? Frankly, I was not familiar with him because I don't get my news, I don't follow podcasts and things on Twitch. Twitch is, something that is very popular with very young people. And, but Mr. Piker has 4.5 million followers on Twitch and YouTube. He has been, according to the New Yorker and the New York Times, he is, quote, the left's answer to right-wing internet influencers. He is apparently the #1 streaming guy on the left in the country. Big deal. And by the way, he's a U.S. citizen. He was born here. So Mr. Piker flew from Paris into Chicago last week and was pulled aside. He's 33 years old, by the way, young guy. He's the biggest progressive streamer in the United States. And he was dragged aside, taken aside by ICE as he was coming through, where you show your passport, customs and immigration, and sent into a room. He said it was, with the bright fluorescent lights and the whole bit. And they interrogated him about things that he had said about Donald Trump. The article's in The Guardian by Owen Jones, although it's increasingly all over the media. #1 progressive streamer in America dragged out of line and detained for hours at O'Hare. And he said they kept trying to get him to say things that might be actionable, like he supports Hamas. Now, this is somebody who has been critical of Netanyahu's bombing Gaza back to the Stone Age. But, you and I both know he's not the only progressive media figure in America who's saying and doing that. He's just the first to re-enter the United States, apparently, and go through Customs and Border Protection. By the way, this guy had global crossing, or global entry, rather. He had, to get global entry, you have to go to, you've got to go to TSA. You're subject to a security check. You have an in-person interview. They take your picture. They do the whole biometric thing. They do a deep dive into your past, and then they decide whether or not you can quickly go through customs. He had global entry, and they dragged him aside anyway. He says, this is just intimidation. When they first started going after people who were not U.S. citizens, like I believe it was Ozurk, the young woman who was a student, a PhD candidate at Tufts University. She's from Turkey, and she was here with, I don't recall if it was a green card or a student visa. I believe it was a student visa. And a year ago, she wrote an op-ed in the student newspaper, trash-talking Netanyahu, and so she was thrown in prison. By the way, why do we call these things detention facilities? These are prisons. I guess our media is trying to sanitize what the administration's up to. She was thrown in prison in Louisiana for 6 weeks. She just got released this week for saying something or writing something in this case. The First Amendment says that Congress shall pass no law restricting freedom of the press or freedom of speech. But here we are. This is wild. This is what it looks like when you live in an authoritarian country. This is what it looks like when you live in a fascist state. Granted, they're not hauling people off in railroad cars yet. But when the government targets you for intimidation because of the content of your speech, and your speech is not calling for death or crimes, then you know your country has passed a major turning point. This is so wrong. The Department of Homeland Security folks are being questioned today by Congress. I hope this gets brought up. Meanwhile, Republicans have a new strategy. This is hysterical. You know, they're trying to figure out ways to pay for a $4.5 trillion tax break for billionaires. You know, Elon Musk needs more tax breaks and more government subsidies. By the way, he's in Saudi Arabia. He just cut a deal with the Saudis, or he was in Saudi Arabia yesterday, cut a deal with the Saudis to use Starlink. Isn't that sweet? Traveling with the president. Not elected to anything. But hey, he bought himself a seat. Anyhow, the Republicans are looking for ways that they can pay for the, you know, these tax breaks for Elon and Donald and Jeff and Mark. And so they're going after hungry kids. Right now, if you are a child and you are under 18 years of age and you live in a household, a low-income household that is at risk for hunger, then you qualify for SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as food stamps, what we used to call food stamps. Well, the Republicans, this legislation that they're putting together that they were marking up last night, they're saying that they want to drop that age from 18 to 10. So if you're 11 years old, you no longer get food stamps. Oh, also, right now, if you are over 54 years old and living in poverty, or living in an area, you know, like Appalachia, where there just aren't jobs, if you're over 54, you qualify for SNAP, for food stamps. They want to raise that to 64. As the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities noted, the Republican proposal could take away food from millions of people in low-income households who are struggling to find steady work or who face substantial barriers to employment, including families with children. Wild stuff.